This is Mafia, the Don's Final Move, an hour-long documentary special produced by the Discovery Channel. And it tells the story of how the FBI took down the Mafia by turning one of their own against them. The last boss of the Bonanno crime family was given a choice by the government in 1985. Either serve 100 years in prison or make one last big move that would bring down the entire Mafia for good. And this last boss's name was Joseph Massino. He was arrested in 1983 alongside his underboss, Anthony Sparrow, after they were caught on wiretaps planning to murder two businessmen. But when the feds listened back on these recordings, they heard something that made the case way bigger than they thought. On one of the tapes, Massino could be heard discussing a secret meeting between the five families: the Genovese, Colombo, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Gambino. And during this meeting, the bosses of each family pledged to kill anyone who was cooperating with the government. Basically, if the feds ever had a mole inside any of these organizations, he'd be dead. This changed everything because it meant that whoever was running the show at the Bonanno family was going to put himself in the most dangerous position of all, that of being the boss. See, now the feds knew that someone from one of the families was feeding them intel, and they needed to find out who. Massino was arrested in the middle of his vacation in Florida, driving a car that was registered to a different guy. And when the cops searched the vehicle, they found 3 guns, silencers, ammunition, along with $14,000 in cash. But perhaps even more telling was the fact that Massino had tried to escape in the first place. Now, clearly, he wasn't just some low-level soldier. It was important. But then things got weird. At his trial, Massino's lawyer insisted that he wasn't guilty and that the tape was fake. And this made no sense to the feds. They had Massino dead to rights. But then they got a tip that this boss may have been trying to flip. Now, you might be wondering why the Mafia would ever allow a rat to slither into their ranks. Well, over the previous decade, the FBI had been able to infiltrate many of the families and had gained intelligence on things like narcotics trafficking, labor racketeering, gambling, extortion, and loan sharking. And the FBI was using this intelligence to arrest hundreds of mobsters, which resulted in the weakening of their criminal enterprises. So instead of just taking it on the chin, the bosses of the families met up and decided that they needed someone who could help them fight back. They sent out recruiters to look for someone who had what it took to be a mafia mole. It required the perfect blend of charisma, street smarts, and criminal cunning. In short, they needed someone who could beat the polygraph test. You see, before allowing someone to join the family, you always had to pass one of these tests. They weren't 100% accurate, but they did weed out most of the weak links. If the person passed, they would be brought into the family and get access to sensitive information and powerful connections. They would also be trusted with lots of money, which made the betrayal all that much sweeter. And after several months of searching, they found their man, a young guy named Donnie Brasco. After passing the test, he became an official member of the Bonanno family and was told about the secret meeting where the bosses had discussed killing rats. Fortunately for him, though, the feds already knew about this plan, and Donnie Brasco was actually an undercover agent working for the government. His mission was to infiltrate the family and gather intel. And it was the greatest undercover operation in FBI history. The other agents came out of the woodwork. One of them was an agent named Joe Peastone, who infiltrated the Bonanno family in the late 70s and early 80s. He went by the name of Donnie Yuzzi and worked his way up to become an official member. He even got married to a mafia princess, which shows how deep his cover was. Another agent, a guy named Edward Iacovetta, went even deeper undercover than Peastone. He joined the family in the early 80s and became close friends with the underboss, Anthony Sparrow. Iacovetta got so close to Sparrow, in fact, that he started helping run illegal gambling operations and eventually became Sparrow's partner in a crew that specialized in hijacking truck shipments. However, Iacovetta never forgot that he was there on a mission. He regularly recorded conversations and sent reports back to the FBI. As both of these undercover agents worked their way up the Bonanno family ladder, the FBI was putting together a massive racketeering case against the family. But they knew that once they filed the case, the entire family would go into lockdown mode, and all the higher-ups would go into hiding, and this would allow the lower-ranking members to slip away. So the FBI wanted to wait until they had enough evidence to take down everyone involved, and they needed Joe Massino. You see, he wasn't just the boss of the Bonanno family. He was also a high-ranking member of the Mafia Commission, a group made up of the 5 bosses that oversaw all family activities. Because of his position, he was in charge of making sure that the families were protected from moles. And he had to do this while staying on top of the day-to-day operations of his own family. And as the pressure mounted, he started to crack. In 1985, he was arrested again and taken into a separate room without his lawyers present. The feds told him that he had 2 options: either plead guilty and go to jail for 10 years, or he could remain silent and face a lifetime behind bars. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of remaining silent, Massino pleaded guilty. He confessed to racketeering, extortion, and gambling, and then he gave the feds the names of everyone who was involved. But the feds didn't know exactly what kind of information Massino had given them, and they were worried that the family would go into hiding, so they kept things quiet and waited. Months went by without incident, and then the news broke. The Mafia Commission had been dismantled. All 5 bosses were either in prison or on the run. This included Massino, who was awaiting his sentence. It turns out that he had given the feds the names of every single member of the commission, and this was the biggest mafia bust in American history. All this time, the FBI had been protecting their undercover agents, but now it was time for them to disappear. Pistone left the Witness Protection Program in 2001 and has been telling the story of his undercover work ever since. Iacovetta disappeared completely, only occasionally popping up in court to testify against former associates, and now you know why. If you enjoyed this video, check out more stories about epic crimes and near misses, and thanks for watching.